Hello, welcome. I hope you're doing so well. I've tried to record this 3 times and my words keep getting mixed up. I'm stumbling all over the place here. So I woke up the other day thinking about this thing that has always plagued me about humanity, which is it would be so nice if we could just live in a peaceful world where we all got along, we all loved each other, and we were all supporting each other and just working together to have a more peaceful, abundant life. And inevitably, when I will think about this or talk to someone about this, someone will say, well, humans by nature are prone to laziness. They are prone to conflict. They are prone to being selfish, right? And we want to defend what's ours, and we want to reinforce that, and we want to keep out, right, other things. And I realize that that's actually not true. And the reason that humans are the way we currently are and why we embody so many of those kind of dense, unhelpful qualities is because of the control that is here. And that control has caused us to be unable to connect to what it is that makes us a human in the first place, which is our ability to have empathy, to have deep feelings, to be sensitive vessels. And then through that level of sensitivity in the body, we are able to connect and to communicate with our energetic field, with our soul. And there are so many things that are done here to keep us from being able to actually commune with ourselves. And that what is so special about humans is that they have this innate divine connection to something beyond this cellular body. And so there are these souls, and I've been talking about this a little bit lately, that are going through this right now, that are experiencing, I almost want to call it this release of this distorted Christ consciousness, which is that what it means to be a human is to suffer. What it means to be a human is to walk this earth and just get more and more constricted and heavy. And the only way to save yourself is to give your power over to something else external to you. I talked about this a bit in my last video, but it's been coming up. I'm still going through it. It's quite intense. One of the things that I'm noticing now too is as I'm having these deep waves of emotion, deep waves of grief and pain move through me, there is this kind of bubbling up of the wounds that are beneath that. And so what I'm also noticing is there is an energy beneath this bubble or this sphere, right? So the wave of grief brings up an awareness about something, right, that I'm struggling with. Let's just say, for example, I'm thinking about a conversation with my daughter, right, or something I've said to her, or how I've kind of treated her. And so beneath, like attached to this energy, right, or this kind of wound, is also an energy beneath that, which says things like, well, you don't even have a right to how you feel about this. Who are you to have feelings? Your feelings are actually what are causing all of these problems. And that's really this matrix energy. And I've been seeing it being dismantled. It's really been about, well, since last August, that this has been kind of, I see it like rebar, right? Like the rebar has all been chopped up, and then there's all these kind of pieces of steel, rusty steel, right, that are coming up with all of these emotions or around these emotions. And so it feels to me, right, that part of how we are actually attacked as humans is that we have such a deep level of sensitivity, and that we have this nervous system, this incredible system, this organic nature about us that is able to have experiences, have emotions and sensations around these experiences, but it is that very nature of feeling and sensitivity that is then attacked, right? And so, of course, this starts in childhood, right, with the patterning where we do not receive what we actually need. We do not receive what would actually meet our needs in those moments, right? And we learn to suppress or twist or navigate or manipulate our own selves so that, or manipulate our own behavior, right, in order to receive what it is we actually, not what we actually need, but an amount of love or physical, clothing, food, whatever it is, in order to actually survive here, right? So we learn how to manipulate ourselves at a very young age in order to be accepted, in order to have our survival, our minimal needs met. And then we carry that through into adulthood, right? But really, as a child, then we learn that having needs, which really, how do we express needs as a child? It's through emotion, right? It becomes a physical expression then, which gets wired into our nervous system, and the response that we receive gets wired into our nervous system, into our brains, right? It becomes this whole complex nature and way of being then, which we tend to describe as our personality, right? So a lot of these things that we do, they serve us in childhood. It's a way of surviving, but as an adult, they become very, very destructive, right? Especially when we're trying to interact with other people then, which by nature, that's what we're meant to do as humans, right? Is to connect with others. And yet we have these things now, and that's really where we start to clash, because those survival skills and those coping mechanisms become the very stuff of what this matrix thrives on, right? Not being able to connect fully through our love, through peace and tranquility. And instead, life becomes this stuff of distortion. That's how we interact. We cause more problems. We have more problems to solve because of it, right? We're busy with the messiness of all of this wounding. And so what I have been experiencing is, as these bubbles come up, right, I'm noticing, again, not only my role in how I behave and act in these ways, but also how this affects other people that I'm interacting with, right? And then, but also the piece where I see now how it has come into my reality, how it was passed into me through my parents, through how they behaved. So it's kind of this, really, to me, it feels like, I want to call it this Trinity, right? Because it's these three pieces that we're having to look at in respect to the dismantling now. And that truly, I keep thinking, well, when do these systems come down, right? And the truth seems to be that it happens from the inside out, because as we start to become painfully aware of our behaviors, and this is something I said not too long ago, that if we all really understood the effect that our behaviors had on other people and the greater world, we would not do them, right? The problem is that we cannot feel the effect that it truly has. We're somehow removed from it, right? And we can't clearly see the effect that it has because we're so blinded by our own wounding and the feeling of our needs not being met, that we're caught up in our own worlds, which by definition then makes us seem very, very selfish, right? We're all trying to selfishly get our needs met, even when we are attempting to be more kind or be more giving or whatever. At the end of the day, what we're seeing is it really all does come down to these wounds that we have inside, that they were patterned and established in childhood. Again, a lot of it comes from beyond this lifetime and beyond just this experience too, but this is the opportunity in this lifetime to release from all of it. And by God, it is happening. And I don't know if I mentioned this in my last video, but when I woke up the other day, I kind of said, like, what is going on with me? And I heard the word transfiguration right? Which I had to kind of look up because the only way I've ever heard of it is the transfiguration of Christ. But really it's this complete shift in our beingness, right? And I am absolutely changed, not to say I don't make mistakes or have it all figured out, but the awareness that I'm having, it's like having to take each instance of emotion now and really dismantling it down to its core. As I mentioned before, right? I'm not able to offload any kind of responsibility onto anyone else. And that may be a place where I have to start, right? Because I feel hurt about something. And so I have to look at the interaction and what happened. But they did this, but I said this, but okay, the reason why I was there in the first place was because I hadn't dealt with this part, right? So really, really getting down to the deep, deep root of all of this stuff. And it truly feels like we have not been able to get down into this level before. So something has opened up where we can get even deeper now down into the source, the seed point of all of this trauma within us. And it's incredibly overwhelming and intense. And I want to say brutal at some points, because to feel, and I suppose if I were ever going to say, oh, karma, right? Like I'm experiencing karma now, it's like, and that's the other part of it though, is yes, it feels awful. And I'm so deeply aware of how the way I have been and what I have done has affected everything I've interacted with, right? Although, like I said, I'm taking it piece by piece. It's very kind of intensive and very deliberate and delicate. So it's not like, oh, okay, I see it all. I'm having to really work through it. And I lost where I was going with that point. At any rate, this is how it's happening. And so there is not this, at least I don't feel from this perspective at this point, that we're just going to see things start crashing down. They might, right? But the harder part, truly the harder part, is where we are attached to these systems in these ways, right? In some ways, it has served us to be in these kinds of behavior patterns, right? We're all just trying to feel safe, which leads to all of us trying to control our realities in a variety of different ways that we're not even really conscious about or conscious to. So as these things are getting dismantled within us, we will start to feel how we can start to remove ourselves from those systems. Those systems will have less and less power because those systems are being powered by virtue of our energy interacting with them and being connected to them. And that's why I feel like this particular group of advanced souls, right, is really going through this right now to really release from that, to establish their own identity through their own divinity, through their own power, sourcing through their own power, right? To be kind of these beacons almost, because this is not an easy process. And once things, right, they start to kind of crumble in that way, it's really going to be a crumbling of the psyche more than it is a physical, cities collapsing around us or whatever it is. The hard part is going to be, how do we handle this in the mind? How do we as a human deal with this kind of collapse? Because facing the reality of how deeply embedded this has been within us beyond anything. If I were to think of how I would write the story, it would not be this way. It is beyond my imagination how this really feels. But on the other hand, it's like, this is how it happens. It is really happening. We are being absolutely cleared and released from these ties to the systems. And of course, that brings up a whole other host of issues, right? So if we're not tied to these things now, but this is how we've been living and we've learned to establish our lives in this way, now how do we live beyond that, without that, right? So this is this kind of like, I can feel this in the heart, right? So if anyone is going through this, it's like there's a bit of like, almost I feel a bit dizzy or spacey with it, right? Because it's like all of a sudden there's more oxygen injected into the atmosphere almost, where it's like, this is exciting, we know this is where we're going, and yet, hold on a second, how do we navigate this, right? And it is the unknown. But this is where we really have to start to deeply connect with our own self and our voice and our soul, because our soul is really the only thing that knows how to walk through this now, right? Because that is source, that is the light, and that's what we're working in now, which has nothing to do with the old ways. So how do I approach this? What is my level of participation in this situation? Where do I place my heart? How do I speak to people? What is my side of the street? How much do I let go of, right? And it's not that this is really such a mental process, but this is all the stuff that's going on inside of the field. So it's a massive convergence now of all of these things here. Like, this is the moment that we have been waiting for. And yet it's almost like there's been a misunderstanding of how this was going to happen, right? Because for so long we were talking about, oh, the feminine has to wake up. Oh, the masculine has to wake up. It's not really about that, right? Like, we have this, I'll just speak of it from this kind of very general viewpoint, right? Of most of us have this awakening, right? This realization that, wait a minute, there's more to me, there's more beyond, there's something else I'm supposed to be doing. We can almost say that is that feminine awakening, right? Awakening to that energy within ourselves. And yet we also have to go through what is really this kind of, I'm hearing it as almost shamanic, but the masculine awakening, right? Which has everything to do with the physicality in the body. And I almost kind of like miss this, except I was having a conversation with someone the other day and they pointed that out, like, this is really the mask. And I was like, oh yeah, like, so we've had to go through both, and it's almost like all of this feminine energy, right? The feminine awakening, the feminine taking back what is theirs, didn't see this pivot needing to happen here, which means, yes, we awaken to the truth of who we are, and then we have to allow for that dismantling through our physical vessel now, that is walking the walk, right? And walking the talk. And I don't believe many people were prepared for this part of it. So, and again, I don't think this is something that's happening on a huge collective level. I think it's very, again, specific to different areas. Like, there's little bits of people that are going through this right now. And it's kind of under the cover of darkness that it's happening, right? So it's a big process, but it is incredibly exciting. And so if you're feeling any part of this, I would just encourage you to have grace for yourself, of course, right? This is unprecedented. In many ways, we knew on a logical level, right? Like, or we had these theories of like, yeah, this is going to have to happen, but having to actually go through it now, it feels a bit like being crucified, right? Like, I am suffering for my sins. I am suffering for the sins of humanity. But to remember the reason humanity is actually suffering to this degree and this level of enslavement in the body, it's not because of us, it's because of the control systems, right? So not to go into the shame around it. And that really gets to be the sticking point. Like, the shame really can stop us, right? It kind of can trap us. This awful feeling of like, how could I have contributed to this on such a level that I didn't even have this awareness? And it's not so much like realizing, oh my God, I did these things, as much as not being able to feel the depth of emotion and pain and grief around these things and ways of being that we have been, right? In order to be able to really detach from them. So it's really like this kind of fog is getting lifted out of the atmosphere, right? There's a lot of confusion, but this is this kind of, well, it's really the byproduct of the matrix system, right? This kind of nasty energetic density that has been with us all of our lives. So I hope if you are experiencing this, that you are moving through this well. Just know it's a big deal. It's not easy. It is a lot of stuff to hold, and really it feels like we've been holding all of this since we incarnated in this lifetime, right? So this, again, continuous like feeling of spiraling down, getting stuck constricted, the harder we try, the worse it feels kind of feeling. So this release, and really it is really like a resurrection is what it feels like, being able to let go of all of this. And yet it is taking a bit of a concerted mental effort to understand this, to be gentle with yourself, and to also start to see those thought patterns that have contributed to these things, right, over time. So really these revelations are incredibly right here, internal, in our own eyes, right, our own eyes, experiencing it through our source light. So it's exciting, but it's a lot. And I think I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.